I'm Gene Grant with this week's Line Opinion Panelists. We just heard what a group of Albuquerque teachers think about the current evaluation system. Now I'd like to put this one to our panelists, and Marilyn, let me start with you. It seems that the numbers were good overall. Most teachers in the state were rated effective or highly effective. There's a lot of debate about teacher evaluations out there. The process, do we have enough time to determine if the process is working or not? That's the big one when I watch this for me.
Exactly, and that was my takeaway. Is in every profession there's some sort of evaluation factor. It's something we need to do.
And all the teachers, by the way, said, I'd love to be evaluated in that segment. It wasn't as if they were shying away from evaluation.
Right, and I think what has happened, the disconnect between PED and the teaching community that I think the teachers' unions have really promoted and advocated for, there's no dialogue. Right. And I don't know if there's anything that could come out of PED that would make a New Mexico public school teacher happy right now. And I don't know that PED feels that they're going to get the real answer and they're not just hearing a union spokesperson. So I think there has to be some sort of discussion about what the appropriate way forward is, because we hold our children accountable to specific guidelines to graduate. We need to find some way to hold our teachers accountable to meet those guidelines. And obviously, this system needs some work.
Yeah. Phil, interesting listening, particularly the teacher from New Futures talking about her special ed kids and the pain, literally from her, talking about, look, there's a lot of other ways to deem success when you're talking to people at a 5th grade level, 6th grade, 7th grade level in high school, trying to get them to a certain goal. The goal may not match what that test is looking for. Is that fair to her?
No, that was really sad. I mean, I took it like it was a sad story for her.
Yes.
Because you're evaluating the test scores of the students who are children who are having a problem anyway, and then comparing those figures and applying it to her. That's really an odd deal there, which shows that there's a flaw in the whole process. I think the other thing is, I think the unions and the school and the unions, or teachers in the unions, having a tough time communicating with the state makes it a real issue. And I think as long as you have that conflict going on there, will you ever come to some kind of solution?
Right.
That's the question.
Right. Eric, interesting, there was a constant theme about that within that teacher group. Look, they're saying, look, we know what's up with this. We don't need to have a result next, fall. I could tell you right now where these kids are. Why can't we listen to teachers?
Well,
isn't that why
I have to, because my wife's
a
teacher and she's a special ed teacher. She's not in the classroom now, but here's the myth about the unions, right? My wife, like a lot of teachers, none of those teachers who we heard in that segment are union activists. They're folks who are being paid less than they're worth to do a very tough job, and the PR coup, I think, of the last few decades has been the right launching this war on teachers, making it about teachers, why they need to be evaluated, what's wrong with the teachers, as opposed to what a couple of those folks said, like, you know what a better predictor of student outcomes is? Poverty. Are they having a good breakfast? Do they get read to at home every day? That's what we should be talking about, not how to slice and dice teachers' evaluations. There is no profession that's being evaluated in the way that we're asking teachers to be evaluated. So here's an idea. We're sitting on $15 billion in our permanent fund. Let's fund early childhood so kids actually get to school ready. Let's actually increase teacher pay. And then if you want to evaluate them to the hilt, I'm all for it. But when we're prepared to really invest in early child education and in teachers, then let's talk about evaluating. But until then, let's talk about poverty, let's talk about health care, let's talk about nutrition, let's talk about child abuse, mental health, all the things that we're not investing in, as opposed to laying at the doorstep of teachers who are making $30,000 and $40,000 a year, who are professionals. 95% of them are good. There's some bad apples, like there are in every profession, but that seems to be the narrative that unfortunately the right has perpetuated, and I find it completely inconsistent with reality. Any teacher I've ever had, the person who I'm married to, people who I work with, just doesn't jive with reality.
That's right, that's right. Interesting, Sophie, how a teacher can't do anything about a kid with an empty stomach in the morning.
Right, and which makes the efforts of organizations like New Mexico Appleseed so important, that push to try and ensure that every child who comes to school each morning is fed, is able to function. I mean, I know what I'm like when I haven't had breakfast.
There you go.
I think that this is a very important issue in a state that has rates of poverty like ours, rates of unemployment like ours. It's not fair to the teachers, sure. It's not fair to the students to expect them to perform when the conditions are such that, they're coming not ready. And I think Eric has brought up some really important points. I am reminded too, and this is, I'm sure people will be horrified, teachers will be horrified at this analogy, but I think of the state of Florida and all the drug testing it's done for welfare recipients, and they've gotten nothing.
Right.
There isn't high level of drug use for those welfare recipients, and here we are testing like crazy to try and find that small handful of students, not students, pardon me, teachers and not drug addicts, but who are ineffective in the classroom. Their principals know who they are.
That's right.
Their colleagues know who they are. Their students know who they are. We don't need these tests to find that. We need good feedback systems within the school and the ability to act on them. And I think that this testing scenario creates this giant workaround and a huge windfall for companies like Pearson, who make a ton of money off this stuff.
There you go. That's all the time we have this week. Join us online to hear more from these guys on the clock. I'm Gene Grant. As always, we appreciate your time and effort to stay informed and engaged, and we'll see you next week in Focus.